Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of LandO's Lock-Ins, the series in which we do our darndest, we do our very best to be the most accurate CDO pick'em predictions possible. Sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. I am looking to have a wonderful, wonderful performance here at Major number 4. It is wild that we are already at Major 4 of 5 so far throughout this season. It feels like it has flown by. If this is your first time checking out LandO's Lock-Ins, welcome to you. I very much appreciate you for joining us here on the channel. Basically, this is a series in which I go through my pick'em process. We talk about the matches. The best part about this entire series is the involvement that you guys have down in the comments. I love hearing your guys' thoughts. I love watching you guys kind of let me know what your thoughts are, your predictions are. Sometimes we go a little crazy. We get a little in the weeds when it comes down to our picks, but you guys are always absolutely fantastic. So if you have never done it already, make sure to scroll down to the comments. Let me know some of your picks throughout this week, if not all of them, because I would love to see what your guys' thoughts are on the matches. So let's go ahead and pull them up, right? Let's go ahead and pull up this week's slate of 10 games. Big ones at that. This entire video, this entire stage is going to be all about champs now, right? We're already halfway through the season, or past the halfway point in the season. We're in Major 4. Now is the time to stress for champs. We've got a lot of teams in the hot seat. We're talking bottom 4 teams. We're talking, in that interesting bubble that's going on right now, kind of run 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. So, very much looking to see how some of those teams play. But yeah, you're going to hear us a lot on the broadcast be talking about that. So definitely should be fun. It is going to be a wild race to the finish line. That's for sure. To get those 8 coveted positions. We're seeing teams make roster changes. We have a new map that's added. There's been a lot of things that have happened since you and I have last talked here on LandO's Lock-Ins. If you have not done so already, make sure to check out LandO's Tiers. By the way, I had a blast doing that series. We uploaded that just a day or so ago with the updated Minnesota roster change. So definitely check that one out. It was a good time, and I feel very good about where I have my teams ranked. Let me just tell you that right now. But let's go ahead and start this thing off. Let's jump into our very first match, that being the Vegas Legion versus the Boston Breach. We'll go ahead and pull up the fan poll to see exactly where you guys are siding when it comes down to this matchup. Basically a 60-40 in favor of the Breach, which makes some sense, right? Considering where both of these teams placed at the Major. We also did see a roster change happen with one of these teams, and we'll start off with Vegas, right? They are in the race for the top 8. There is a conversation going on around multiple teams in the league, but the biggest conversation is happening right now with the Vegas Legion, with the Minnesota Rocker. Can Vegas catch Minnesota? Can Rocker hold off what is going to be a very solid push, it would seem like, from Vegas right now, which they are off of a top 6 finish at Major 3. They still made the roster change, which I very much commend them for. It is a controversial move at that. 2 Real is out. Standy is in. Different players, but it feels like for Vegas, they got really all that they wanted out of 2 Real, which is to learn the game better, to really understand maybe how to play the game the right way. Feels like he really got the guys organized, and it seems like from their POV, they got that instructional type of player in game. They now have that mindset. Now let's bring in Standy to do the work, to do the slang work that we need. On the other side for Boston Breach, right, they are off of a top 4 finish at the Texas Major. Biggest bullet point for me is that, hey, you know what? Breach looking solid. It feels like that Beans move has absolutely panned out great for them. It just feels like at certain moments they do have the tendency to be inconsistent with some of their main slayers. Beans, I think, needs to get more consistent. I think the same thing can be said for Awakening from online to LAN. But the positives with Breach is that, granted, sometimes your stars are inconsistent, but the positive for Boston is that it feels like for them, what they've shown us after this roster change with Beans is that they have the potential to actually be solid at all 3 game modes, especially if they can be good at Expo control, which is going to be a big talking point for a lot of different teams in the league. Now with that map out, some teams were horrible at it. Some teams were great at it. How did they both adapt to it? And it feels like right now for Boston Breach, they do have, some good control maps. I think getting rid of Fortress is going to be interesting to see how they translate to that. They definitely like Fortress lately. Now, I will say, speaking of Expo Control, getting into the predictions for this series, I actually think that in the opening match of Major 4, I know there's a lot of controversy around this map. I think that this has the ability to actually be the first series of Major 4 and the first matchup that actually has Expo Control in it. Boston, very much like Fortress, Vegas did not. So you can kind of see where both teams' mentalities are right now. Vegas literally lost to Marky B. He literally lost to a coach on Fortress Control. So they are very happy to have that out of the map pool, that's for sure. So again, Boston previously liked Fortress, Vegas did not. Last series that Vegas did play against Breach was in a 3-0 fashion. And I want to say Fortress was played. I'll have to check on that another time. I forget. But regardless, the reason why we could also see Expo is because I believe that for Vegas, right, you want to ban out El Asilo, in my opinion, is that is Boston's one of their best control maps. Undoubtedly, I think Nero has like a 9 KD on it or something absurd. It's not a 9 KD, but it's something crazy. And then for Breach, if you're them, right, you might want to get rid of Hotel. It is your worst control. It also happens to be Vegas's only decent control map. So in that case, I feel like there is a decent chance that maybe we do see Expo come through, which does cater into the predictions for this series. That is a toss-up. Who knows how both teams are playing on it? Who knows if both teams are really scrimmaging on it all that much? So there is a chance, for an upset, in my opinion, when it comes down to this game. Boston are going to be the favorites. There's no doubt about it. We obviously see, based off of the fan poll, 60-40. I think it's actually, I don't know. I expected it to be a little higher, but I know that the Vegas fans are obviously out there. A lot of love for Clayster lately. They've been in the news a lot, obviously, given the roster change of adding Standy. The drama between him and Scrappy has been very fun to watch. I don't know. I feel like there was definitely a chance for an upset. I think this is probably going to be more 50-50 from maybe more from talent or from just, maybe more known people in the league. I think the hot vote here is to go with Vegas. However, I do bet pretty highly on the Breach side. I feel like in the online environment, again, you're off of a top 4 finish. You should be feeling confident. This is also Vegas Legion, their first official matchup with Standy in the team. I think that they do get better. However, I just feel like Boston right now, they are a threat across all 3 modes. Sometimes they could be incredibly dominant in hardpoint. I feel like if that sniper is flowing well for Beans, there's a chance where Boston could also upset in the S&D. And then in control, who knows? But I just feel like this one probably goes to a pretty decent length, game 4, game 5, but I do think that Breach ends up taking it. However, I totally understand a Vegas pick in this opening game. We'll go ahead and take a look now at our second matchup, that is London versus LAT. And goodness sake, 92.5 to 7.5 in favor of the Thieves. I don't know. It's definitely higher than it should be. But the Ravens, number 12 in the standings, they need momentum now. Like, that is the ultimate note right now for London. This is their final chance, their final push. They are at 50 points. They are number 12 in the standings. They have got to get something flowing. Because if you don't, Major 5 is just going to be a wash. It's going to be like, okay, why are we even here? There's basically no chance. They have a chance. Now, it's very, very slim. It's very small. But basically, as we all know, for the Ravens, you need some teams above you to lose. You need to win the games that are guaranteed. An opening win versus Thieves would be phenomenal for them. It feels like for Ravens, I mean, how many chances did they have at Major 3 to walk away with W's? I mean, we talked about that on LandO's tiers, like the amount of close games that they had, the amount of opportunities where they should have closed out games earlier, is wild. And I do commend the Ravens for making that roster change. They will have Yuli in now for Paul X. It feels like, on the SMG side of things, maybe that can unlock Asim a bit more, who, as we know, is unbelievably gifted, very talented. Somebody who can just take over maps, take over series from time to time. So you combine what hopefully should be an unlocking of Asim, paired with a phenomenal flex in Nasty right now. Scraps or Tank has been solid lately as the main AR. And then on the other side, You have Yuli, who's an unknown quantity. Who knows? Maybe he could come in and absolutely surprise us. So that is something that Thieves are going to have to be conscious of in this opening game, is that there is a new Ravens roster. They had the chance to surprise. They had the chance to really, honestly, take pretty much any game except for Control. But with Fortress being out, maybe there is a very good chance that the worst team in Control now has an opportunity to maybe get a little bit better at this mode. The only problem for Ravens is that Fortress was actually their best Control, so they probably would have preferred like an asilo or a hotel maybe to get removed. But it is what it is. It is what it is. For the Thieves, time to wake up. Time to wake up off of the horrible loss versus Vegas. I mean, for real. Like, there is no way that you should choke a hard point advantage like that. It is one of the biggest comebacks that we've ever seen in Call of Duty history in hardpoint. They also, by the way, lost the Search Destroy in a round 11. They lose the game 4. I think it was on Mercado by like 20 points. You had your chances, right? You had your chances to get past the Las Vegas Legion. That next game would have been versus Boston. They stand at a very decent chance of at least finishing top 6, if not top 4, if they just close out games. So that's the frustrating part for the Thieves, is that you've had two pretty, uncharacteristic placements when we talk about the defending champions. Obviously, they did have that second place finish at Major number 2, where they had to make a wild losers run. This matchup for me is big momentum-wise for the Thieves to really kind of get back in a good spot. I feel like it's fair to say that this team is going to stick until the very end of the year. They are going to be at Champs as a full 4-man lineup once more. And so you need something, right? You're number 5 in the standings. You're very close, honestly, to you're 20 points away from 3rd. At the same time, you're also 20 points away from being in 7th. So, we'll see how the Thieves play. But again, they just need to wake up, and this could be their chance. So you can kind of look at this prediction a few different ways. I actually think it's much closer than this. A 92% in favor of the Thieves. I definitely want to give Ravens some props here, because I did say that out of the bottom 4 teams, I feel like they to me look like the most promising one if you flip Vegas and Minnesota right now. So Minnesota being in that position, maybe along with Ravens, which I think, I don't know, maybe not, but you got to get my point of view. Basically, the Ravens, I feel much better about them. The issue is that you're facing off against the Thieves, a Thieves team who can absolutely not allow for this game to slip. So I think that LAT is going to be on their A game. I think they walk away with it in a 3-1. However, I do hope it's a good debut for Yuli. Very excited to see him play. Excited to see, hopefully, the Ravens enter into just a different state, a state where they can finally close out games. This is a very tough matchup for them, though. We'll see how they play. Final matchup here of Friday. We've got New York actually taking on Atlanta FaZe. This should be a wonderful game. Excited to see this one. This is basically a 1-1 scoreline all season long between these teams. I believe that it was New York who won the occasion before this, or maybe not. I forget. It's like actually, I do want to look that up because I remember I think it was Atlanta who beat them in like a game 5 round 10, or was it the opposite? No, it was New York who beat them at the Major 1 tournament, and then Atlanta then beat them I think like a game 5, round 10 in the Major 2 qualifiers. They've had some pretty good battles up until this season, up to this point. For New York, is it time to panic? Right? Is it time to panic if you are a New York fan? The last 2 qualifiers for them have ended in a top 8 and a top 12. They did also, on top of it, just lose their very best map and mode combo in the game, which is Fortress Control. They had the number 1 record in the league on it. They were number 1 or number 2 in basically every single category. So if you are New York, you're hoping that maybe they can not just be good online, but also translate it to LAN. The issue is that now you have lost Fortress Control. At the same time, though, the reason on how New York was able to win the opening tournament back in Raleigh was their ability to adapt early, their ability to figure out how to play the game the right way. I hope for NYSL they have been putting in more reps than anybody else for that same reason we talked about at Raleigh. Also because the number 1 team at the map that just got taken out of the game, they've got to make sure that they can be good at Expo. They cannot allow for Control to start to slip because if so, that could spell disaster and start to have them fall through the ranks of the standings right now. for me, if I could identify one thing for New York that has caused the issues on LAN, or at least recent issues, is really hardpoint, and it's close respawn losses. Lots of round 5 losses in control. And if you look at their hardpoints, all 4 hardpoints of the Texas Major for New York were within 30 points. 2 of them were within 6 points. And in their last 8 hardpoint losses, 6 of those were within 25 points. So for New York, it is about trying to close out HPs. It is about trying to make sure that not only do you get to that point, but if you do, adapting, winning those final crucial fights. To me, with a record like that, with how many have gone that direction, yet you sit with a 2-6 record in your last 8 hardpoint losses or whatever that were within those 20 points, 25 points, there's something going wrong in the later stages of games. Maybe it's based off of calls, maybe it's communication, who knows? They got to be better in spots like that. On the other side, Atlanta FaZe, forgot to pull up the fan poll, by the way. Wow, that is honest. That's crazy. Like, I guess it makes sense. It does make sense. On the other side for FaZe, every loss this season for them stems back to a loss in control. It is good for them to actually have that fortress control out. I know a lot of people will expect them to probably be good at fortress control. They don't really play it a whole lot, even though they do have Simp and Abizi on the team. We know the issues with FaZe, right? It is all about the hard points. It is all about closing out hard points. The S&D is impeccable. 16-1 in Search Destroy since going to the Boston Major. Unreal numbers. They broke the Search Destroy streak in the CDL. An unbelievably talented roster who has finished top 3 at every single event. Again, there's been a lot of conversations about whether this team deserves to be in the S tier, and to me, it's wild. I don't understand how this is even a debate. We talked about it for like 15 minutes on LandO's tiers. It was a fun rant. It's a fun rant indeed. New York, Atlanta. I actually think there's a chance that we could see an upset here. However, I'm not going to go with it. I do like New York a lot. I do feel like them losing that fortress control is pretty big mentality-wise. Like I said, every time New York has either beaten Atlanta or they've at least played them close. But this time around, I think for FaZe, they do smell blood in the water. I think this team is hungry. I think for FaZe, a lot of questions on them. A lot of, I think there's a lot of speculation in terms of, can they actually really be, a top tier team consistently? Are they really just going to be, a roster that kind of sits amongst the others? I don't know. I don't really hear that noise a lot, but I've seen it a decent amount when it comes down to different posts and stuff. Regardless, though, I like Atlanta here. I think they close it out, and I think they start off Major 4 1-0. So let's go ahead and take a look at Saturday. This is going to be a fun day. It's going to be a fun matchup to start it off because this is actually the Minnesota home series. I know it sounds a little strange, but I'm pretty sure that they are actually flying out Florida and the Gorillas to Wisconsin to play in front of a live crowd. So this is very, very fun. I'm very excited to see how these games go. Like, I'm assuming, there's going to be maybe some shots of the crowd, or I don't know exactly how it's going to play. But I hope that at least from an online aspect, some of us get to see exactly what's going down over there. So this is going to be Minnesota basically in front of a home crowd in Wisconsin. The same thing can be said for teams like Florida and LAG. You're going to have to be ready for it. You get to play on LAN, which is awesome. But you are going to be facing off against Minnesota's home crowd, who we know from last year is very, very passionate about their squad. For Florida, 2-4 at S&D. That to me is the biggest focal point right now for this roster, is that I expected for them to get better at hardpoint, remain solid in S&D. It's not been that way. It has been getting better at hardpoint and not being good in Search Destroy. So like I said, that 2-4 record at S&D is not solid. And the only map that they have won since this roster has formed together is Fortress S&D. So if you're Minnesota, you want to get that one out of there if possible. I feel like if Florida, they need to take a step forward, and I feel like if they don't, they're not going to be special in really any game mode. And that's the issue when you're facing off against really any team in the league, is that if you don't have a specialty game mode, something to rely on, you're going to get picked apart. And you're going to have those moments where things begin to click, but typically it does not lead to a whole lot of consistent success. On the other side for Minnesota, a team who actually did decide to make a roster change, as we'll pull up the fan poll. A team who did decide to make a roster change. They have brought in Fame in place of Attach. Very, very controversial move. Understandably so. Attaches the captain. He has been the face of the Rocker franchise for the past few seasons. Why is he the first one to go? In my opinion, it is probably based off of comfort. I know that the players have talked about it, but I think for the other three, they feel more comfortable with each other. I know for Bance and Cammy rather, we know, right? They've got plenty of experience when it comes down to playing with each other. Maybe for when it comes down to Afro, maybe there's an element too where he feels more comfortable potentially with the other guy switching up roles. I think Cammy switching to a main AR. We'll see if Fame runs that flex or not. If not, then obviously that'd be Bance who makes the swap. Regardless, I see it a few different ways, right? If Minnesota feels like this is the best move to make, and if the players feel like this is the best move to make, which in my opinion is what it is, I don't blame them, right? If the other three players do not feel comfortable with what's going on right now in the camp, you kind of have to side with them. You have to side with the players. You can't really go against what the other three are saying. At the same time, I feel like Attach is a phenomenal player. I know lately for Minnesota, things have been horrible, right? They're like, they didn't win a single match in Major 3. They've lost their last 11 search destroys. Things are horrible. Things are terrible right now with Minnesota. So should they have made a move? Yes. To me, is this the right move? Not necessarily, but I think at the same time, if you feel like you're limited, if Minnesota did try to reach out to a few teams to make a move happen and nothing solidified, what else are you going to do? So it is definitely a lose-lose spot for Minnesota, but I feel like it could be a win because you are facing off against Florida. You are facing off against LAG. You do have fans in front of you. You're playing on LAN. And for the first time, I think maybe in CDL history, or at least in a long time, we're seeing a team play two qualifier matches in the same day. So for Rocker, that's a huge advantage. I mean, we talk about that so often when it comes down to tournaments. A team who is hot, a team that's maybe in stride a bit. How wonderful is it for Rocker that you play a match, you have a break, you play another match, and you're playing online technically, even though you're in a LAN atmosphere? I don't know. But it is going to be the debut of Fame. Excited to see what he can do with the squad. All eyes are on Rocker to try and perform. And I don't know. I guess I'm not surprised that there are a lot of votes going for Florida. But I do think that when it comes down to community outlook, a lot of people very heavy to criticize the Minnesota team for making a move like this. I commend teams for making big moves, even if they're not popular. So there is that element to it. I do feel like for the Rocker though, they're going to have to win at some point. And I do think that they're able to take down the Florida Mutineers here. I think it's going to be a fun series. I think it has the ability to be a grueler. But again, I'm just not a big fan of this Mutineers team right now. I'm not. I feel like we talk about hardpoint. That can maybe be their specialty. Search, destroy. I don't know. Again, it just feels like it's kind of all over the place. Florida on occasion is winning like a hotel control. Like it's very spotty. I feel like the opportunity is there for Minnesota. You've got everybody watching you, including the fans who are literally watching, you in a live atmosphere. I think they turn up. I think they win this game, and we'll see how they play versus LAG. But first, before then, we got to talk about Toronto versus Boston. This is a fun matchup. This is always a good one. We know for the Ultra, right, they are off of the Major 3 championship. I did put them in the S tier on LandO's tiers, deservedly so. It feels like they have lasting potential to actually be a top tier team in the game. We have been waiting for Toronto to reach that peak, and after the roster change, they have looked phenomenal. At the Texas Major, they go 5-1 in Search Destroy. After in the qualifiers, they started off 2-4. They have the ability to be absolutely elite and lethal in the HPs, as that's what we saw them do versus OPTX in the finals at that major. And they are right now the best control team in the game. And Fortress, which has just been removed, it is their least played map, now out of the rotation. So right now for Toronto Ultra, not only are you having a little bit of a buff with having your best mode and your worst map taken out, so you're only surely going to get better at it. You're also in a great state. You are 7-1 with this new lineup. Again, for Toronto, just nothing but praise for those guys. I feel like they have been really going through it. That roster change was not heavily liked by a lot of people. Hixie, was kind of an unknown quantity to a lot of people in the league. How is he going to play? Had that huge 1v1 versus Ghosty that really gave the team a lot of momentum. So nothing but praise to the Toronto side. It feels like that is a roster that, to me at least, is going to contend for the next 3 tournaments and the last 3 tournaments of the season. On the other side for Boston Breach, this is their second matchup here in Major 4. I had them off of a win versus Vegas. However, I feel like it's definitely going to be more 50-50. So they very well could be 1-0. They also could be 0-1. If you guys have already, or if you haven't already checked it out, I highly recommend that you do so. Beans versus Scrappy and Hixie. This is a fun matchup. It feels like there was definitely a bit of a rivalry brewing between both of these teams. Beans and the Breach Boys actually ended up taking out Toronto Ultra in the Major 3 qualifiers. I think that was actually the last matchup that they ended up playing with Standy at the Texas Major. This goes to a game 5, right? This literally goes to a game 5. Breach ends up winning both of the hard points, and they end up losing the game 2 Fortress Search Destroy in a round 11. So if you're Boston, you are 1 round of Search Destroy away from taking out Toronto, the team that would go on to win the entire tournament, which is wild. So again, for Breach, you've had their number previously. Whenever you have played them, you've either beat them or you've played them in a very close manner. I don't know. It's just something about this matchup works really well for the Breach. And I think for me, I don't know if I actually have pulled up the fan poll. I don't think I have. Yeah, 90% going for Toronto. People love the Ultra, as they should. But this is a huge week for Toronto. They've got Boston. The next day they face off against the Seattle Surge. I don't know. I just feel like for this game, like there's definitely a chance that Breach could come through, maybe make an upset. And I think that's the way that I'm going to go with this one. I am going to go ahead and lock in a Boston Breach over Toronto Ultra W. Again, it's an interesting call. I don't know if it's going to work out for me, but I do feel like Breach, they've had their number. I think we're going to see a more consistent Beans and Awakening. And maybe for Ultra, you know what? Boston's already played 1 game. They've got a series under their belt. They come into this matchup versus the defending champions, who maybe could be a little fat and happy after a W like that. I don't know. That's the way that I'm kind of angling in a bit. But regardless, Boston get the dub. Slow start for Toronto and a big week for Boston. Potentially 2-0 for them in week number 1. We're jumping in again to Minnesota versus LAG now. As I said, Rocker home series matchup in Wisconsin. Like I said, I think to me, or to my knowledge, one of the first times ever that we've seen a team play 2 matches in 1 day in a qualifier. Props to them for getting that done. And how about the timing as well for Minnesota, who definitely needs to try to distance themselves as much as they can, considering that they are in the 8th seed. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that if based off of my prediction, so let's just go ahead and say this. So let's say that Minnesota beat Florida. Let's just say for sake of conversation, they also beat LAG. Vegas lose. So Minnesota's the 8th seed. Vegas is number 9. They are currently separated by 20 points. If Rocker go 2-0, Vegas starts off a little slow. We then have a divide between the 8 and 9 seed by 40 points. And on top of it all, if Minnesota is able to win both of these games, and on the opposite side for Seattle, granted, they're playing 2 difficult rosters, they could start off 0-2. So best case scenario for Minnesota, Vegas lose their 1 game, Seattle starts off 0-2. If both of those things happen and you win your games on LAN, not only do you have a 40-point buff between yourself and the 9th seed, you will tie with Seattle Surge for the 7th seed. So that to me is a huge storyline to watch out for this week. It is to watch Vegas, it is to watch Seattle, it is to watch Minnesota. Very, very big games and a huge opportunity for Rocker if all 3 of those things can happen. But you got to focus on winning your matchups. On the other side, for the LA Gorillas, Major 3 ended in shambles, right? Player injury, Arcides. I don't know what's actually going on with him, to be honest. I'm assuming he's okay. I'm assuming he's playing. But we end up seeing a coach substitution. Marky B comes in, steals the heart of Texas without a doubt. Winning that Fortress control over Vegas was hilarious. But in all seriousness, I just feel like the wind is very much out of the sails right now for LAG. It feels like the hard points they're always open to lose those. They went on that crazy streak where after winning a bunch of hard points in a row, they couldn't win a single hard point. S&D isn't necessarily on point, and or I guess it is at times, and then in Control, it's more 50-50. It just feels like for me, if LAG doesn't have Assault popping off or Exceed making some wild runs, it just isn't there. They start off the Major 3 qualifiers 0-3. They just sneak into the 8th seed after beating Florida and Vegas. They didn't really take down any Titan-like rosters. So I think this team has the chance to contend for sure at times with some top caliber teams. But right now for Gorillas, it just does not feel like there's a whole lot of things to be excited about. Like the Academy team just got dropped. Like, I don't know. It just feels like for LAG, there's not a whole lot going for you. And I really wish that they did make a roster change. Unfortunately, they did not. And with that, if you do lose some of your opening games, things could start to get bad pretty early. With that being the case, I am actually going to say that Minnesota takes this. I think that Rocker end up beating LAG in this spot. It is 60% in their favor after having a non-favorable game versus Florida, according to the fans. So I think that Minnesota, they do their job, right? They do what they have to. They start off 2-0. What does Seattle do? What does Vegas do? We will have to see. And speaking of Seattle, we'll go ahead and chat about them now, as they will have the next 2 games ending out Saturday, starting off Sunday versus the Thieves. How are they going to look? For Surge, a lot of people are curious, where do we put them in the tiers? Where does Seattle belong? And I've said it multiple times. Seattle, ever since they have been formed, are a team that by one gunfight can finish top 3 and finish top 12. That has been their, that's really where they've been all season long, right? They are either in the grand finals or they're finishing last place. This tournament, they finished right dead center top 6. And the reason for it is because they're one hip fire kill away from top 3, right? One hip fire kill goes a different direction, and they are going to play Toronto Ultra in the winners bracket finals. To me, like I said, this tournament was the definition of what Seattle are. At times, they are impeccable. At times, they look phenomenal. And at times, they just don't, right? They go on the wonderful spree. They're winning Search and Destroys. We were talking about that. They're winning S&Ds. This could be the turnaround that we have been waiting for. How do they play the Texas Major? They go 1-4 in S&Ds. Seattle is without question, to me, the hardest team to predict sometimes. They're very difficult to really get a decent feeling of. How are they going to play? How are they going to look? I don't know. It's difficult for me. I feel like we're all constantly waiting for the opportunity to say, Seattle, now you need to make a move. And they're like, no, we're not going to. We're just going to make a crazy turnaround, do something wild, pull off something insane. The issue, though, for Seattle is that you have 1 good placement, 2 not great placements. Top 6 isn't horrible, but it's definitely not where this team wants to be. And with that being the case, now they sit in the 7th seed. We've been talking about it all episode long for Seattle. You start off 0-2. Minnesota, they win their 2 games this week. You are then tied for the 8th seed. So you definitely need to walk away with one of these matchups. Is it going to happen versus the Thieves? I don't know. We'll actually go and take a look at the fan poll for this matchup. And there's a lot of props that are being tossed Seattle's way here, which I think is interesting. So for Thieves, I have them off the win versus London. If they should be, but if not, this becomes a much needed win. I think these teams actually trade hard points. I think S&D for me is a toss up. I mean, who knows? Like I said, for Seattle, maybe they're going to be dominant. Maybe they're not going to be. Thieves lately have been really throwing away a lot of their search destroy situations. Control also could be a toss up. Both teams are good at it. But maybe I just give the slight edge to Thieves. I don't know. It's such a hard call to make. I feel like this game, and this game. Or sorry, what is it? 1, 2, 3. 3 of these 4 games are impossible to call, in my opinion. Just given how much of a wild card that Seattle are, I'm going to say that this goes to a game 5, but Thieves clutch it up. I can't really talk about it more than that. It just feels like this is going to be a straight up dogfight type of game. I hope that it goes the distance. I think that it will. I feel like these teams are going to be pretty well matched up. And for Surge, maybe you go into day number 3, head down a little bit, but now you got to face off against the defending champions. Interesting enough, Seattle versus Toronto. These teams have only played one time so far this season, back in Major 1. I talked about it. If Seattle beats Atlanta FaZe in that crazy round 11, we end up seeing Seattle play against Toronto. And a lot of people actually thought that Seattle probably would have played Toronto much closer than Atlanta did. If that's the case, Seattle are going to the grand finals, which is crazy to think about, that just one situation could cascade into another. But Surge off the big game versus Thieves. As I said, SD very much questioned. I feel like we'll know a lot about Surge after they do play that game versus Thieves. So this very well could be a prediction that does change depending on how Toronto plays versus Boston, depending on how Seattle plays versus Thieves. For Ultra, I do have them off of that shocking loss versus Breach. They're going to have to instantly focus up. If they do start 0-2, by the way, if Toronto does get caught off guard by Boston and they do lose this one to Seattle, they've got Atlanta in their next game. So this needs to be a 1-1 minimum performance from Ultra this week. But I will say this. This is a big week, I think, for Toronto from a community aspect. From a caster aspect, I'm looking at this week as huge for Ultra, right? You just won a championship. Some of your guys, this is the first time they've ever won a title. Hixie at his first ever event as a pro, just won a championship. Huge deal for the team. Huge deal for the squad. First time Toronto has managed to hold up a title since Cold War. It's a big deal for them. Now with this new roster, how are you going to play coming into this week? I feel like if they finish off 1-1, which is where a lot of people expect them to, they're going to maybe fall to Boston or maybe fall to Seattle. It's possible. But if they finish off 0-2, I hate to say it, but we know Toronto is just like, okay, they're a good team, but maybe not elite level where they have the ability to lose. But I feel like if they start off 2-0, we're going to be like, okay, Toronto is that team. They might be the team to beat now. So it feels like the community opinion of Toronto not only changed dramatically after their Major 3 win, but it has the ability to change a heck of a lot more depending on how these next two games go versus very, very solid opponents. So like I said, consistency, inconsistency, what are we going to see from Toronto? I feel like they do have the chance to shock Surge in the hard points. I actually do like Toronto more in Search Destroys, and I feel like in Control, this has the ability to also go Ultra's way. So it's a weird prediction. I 100% agree with it, but Toronto, I think, might win this in a 3-0, and this is a huge game that is favoring Ultra by a fan vote. 82% is wild for me because I actually think this is probably more 50-50. Regardless of it, though, like I said, Toronto has the opportunity to shock you in the HPs as they've done it versus OPTX. Seattle could experience that same thing. I like Toronto because they've been more consistent in Search Destroy with this new lineup. However, on the Major 3 qualifiers, they didn't look great in Search Destroy. And then in Control, Toronto are the best control team. They have the best control player, and their worst map just got removed. I like Toronto in the Control. So I think this is an odd but a accurate prediction. Toronto 3-0, even though I feel like this is a lot closer than it appears. Let's go and jump in now to OPTX versus London. This is also for double points, so we got to keep our eyes open for that. Optic, whew, feels like we could write a book about every single qualifier so far for OPTX. They're off the top 4 finish at Major 2. We come into Major 3 with the roster change. Everyone's like, okay, listen, you just finished top 4. Like, we're really going to make a move? Like, you guys, this team didn't really play with each other for a whole long time. Then they come out, they lose their opening game versus Boston 3-0. Everyone's like, see, I told you this wasn't the move to make. And what do? They go on a historical losers bracket run. Starting off in losers round 1, they managed to make their way all the way to the finals, in which there is one situation, in my eyes, one gunfight away from at least forcing a game 7, if not, maybe winning the tournament. Maybe winning the entire event if one gunfight goes a different direction. It's between the rookies. It's between the 2 players who are at their first event ever as a pro. Hixie versus Ghosty. Hotel S&D. I'm sure some of you remember it. If not, you can go back and watch it. It was game 5. I forget. I think OPTX was up a decent margin. If Ghosty wins that, they are winning that Search Destroy. And what happens is that Hixie goes for the late challenge. rather Hixie ends up going low, stays alive, cuts away Ghosty. They win that. Toronto then wins a bunch of rounds in a row, win that game 5. They then go on to win the next LSCLO control, and that is the tournament. If Optic wins that, they go up in a dramatic fashion. They're closing out that game, and we are guaranteed going at least to a game 7. If not, Texas closes it out. So huge props to Optic Texas, to be frank, for coming out with a W like that. I think the only issue with Texas is just a matter of like, it felt like they've looked very sloppy on a lot of occasions, and then they managed to figure it out, right? They managed to like get in the sweet spot. Can they continue to do that? Are they going to win hard points like this in a consistent fashion? If so, I'm going to tell you what, this is not going to be the last time that we see Texas maybe top 3 this season, because if they're able to win hard points like that, go on a spree like that, that is absolutely terrifying. They win 9 hard points in a row through their lower bracket run, and this is going to be their only series this week. For London, I have them off the series versus the Thieves. I believe that will be a loss. However, there is a lot to like about this new Ravens team. This is the second series with Yuli in the lineup, so I think that for London, this should be them in great form, right? You're able to have a bunch of practice. You've been able to play your opening game. Now you have the chance to really focus in here versus Optic Texas. You have the ability to surprise. So we'll see how they play. And then also one thing that's interesting is that these teams did play actually at the Texas Major. London was the team that allowed for a crazy game 4 Mercado hardpoint comeback that to me spiraled what would later be the losers bracket run for Optic Texas. Like if we talked about so many situations for Ravens where they should have closed out games, they should have closed out series. This was a prime example of it. They should have beaten Optic Texas. They allow for them to make a comeback on the Mercado hardpoint. From there, they lose the series in a game 5. The rest is history. Texas goes on to win the whole turn, or rather, sorry, to go make it all the way through the lower bracket to get into the finals of their home tournament. So when it comes down to this game, I think I definitely like the firepower more on Optic Texas. I know the fan poll is going to be crazy in favor of Texas. It's definitely closer than that. But I think right now for Optic, you have to like them. I think in the hard points, you have to like them. For London, just an unknown quantity. We don't really know how they're going to play. We don't know if maybe they're going to come away with some surprise picks. I'd love for them to try to maybe change up the vetoes a little bit, try to find their identity. Issue is that you're playing, two teams who absolutely know their identity. You're facing off against Thieves. You're facing off against Optic Texas. It is a rough week 1 draw for the Ravens. I think they actually do make it pretty close, but I think it's going to be a win in the end for Texas. They closed out in 5, much like how they did at their home major. Alrighty, last game of major for week 1, Atlanta FaZe versus the Florida Mutineers. So Atlanta off of the Spicy series versus New York. I have them taking that. It should be a win for FaZe, but we will see. We were talking so much throughout this entire video about the top 8 threshold, right? Who's going to get there? Can Minnesota hold off Vegas? Can Vegas make a little bit of something happen? Can Seattle get caught, or can they hold off a bit as well? A big thing to keep in mind in the standings is that for Atlanta, they have the ability to be caught this week by Toronto. So we're talking a lot about top 8. I want us to take a very good look, a solid look at number 1 and number 2. So a Toronto 2-0 week has them catching FaZe regardless of whatever Atlanta does. So Toronto's at 215, Atlanta's at 225. If Ultra does manage to win both of their games versus Boston and Seattle, that does a lot for their confidence. We said how huge that would be for the Ultra. If they end up winning that, they not only have 225, but they have 235 passing FaZe. On the other side for Atlanta, right? If you are able to win your game over New York, if you're able to win your game versus Florida, you can hold them off, but 1 loss, 2 wins for Toronto, you're tied. I think I actually described that a little bit different. Atlanta can hold them off, but they can only be within 10 points again, is what I'm trying to say. Atlanta definitely has the chance to be caught by Ultra this week, potentially. I think I said regardless, but you get my point. Toronto, if they play well, they can catch FaZe if FaZe does slip up. Which is very interesting, right? It's very interesting that Atlanta has the chance as the number 1 seed. It feels like for so many years, Atlanta has been guaranteed to be number 1. Nobody's going to catch them. Toronto's hot on their heels, right? Ultra is very much hot on their heels. Regardless, though, for Atlanta, like I said, I do have them coming off the series versus New York. However, I think it could be close. For Florida, I do have them off the loss versus Rocker. A very good chance in Minnesota's opening match that it could be a win for the Mutineers. That's what the fan poll is saying right now. Wow. That is interesting. Atlanta FaZe, Florida Mutineers, 98.2 in favor of FaZe over Florida, and you can see why, given the history that these franchises have versus each other. It is typically a very, very quick game. 3-0, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1. Yeah. I'm not going to really stray too far away from it. I think that it is Atlanta who was able to walk away with this. I think FaZe do finish this week 2-0. However, that game versus New York is definitely scary. So there was that. I feel like for Florida, this isn't a horrific matchup for the Mutineers like it used to be. For Florida, if they were that same S&D team, the issue is that you're facing off against the best S&D team in the game, in the world, and they happen to be better at you than Respawns. Right now for Florida, there's a chance that they could win a hard point, right? There is a chance that they could maybe walk away with an HP, given that is without question Atlanta's biggest issue is closing out hard points. It is just winning HPs in general. However, I do think that for Atlanta, they at the very least trade the HPs, they win the control, and they without a doubt win the S&D. So with that being the case, that is us closing up this week. As I said, huge games. I think we've talked about it. We've kind of commented on it pretty accurately on the teams to look out for. Your Minnesotas, your Seattles, your Torontos, your Atlantas, whatever it may be. So many squads, your Vegas Legions, so many squads to look out for. These have some massive implications when it comes down to who is going to be going to champs. So I hope that you guys did enjoy this episode of LandO's Lock-Ins. I had a blast recording it for you guys. I know it's coming out a little bit later than I would have liked it to, but we're staying consistent. We'll see if we can get it out better and a more efficient time next week. So I do apologize for that, but thank you guys so much for the support on the channel. If you've not done so already, make sure to check out caster reactions. Make sure to check out LandO's tiers, as well as other content. We'll be having a vlog uploaded not too long from now either, so stay tuned for all that stuff. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video, and I'll see you back on the channel very soon.